do you find? Now ovule actually after fertilization it becomes the seed, no doubt in that. The question is that how do we show the structure of an ovule? Now first of all you need to be very careful about mentioning some important terms. When you are describing the structure of ovule, you need to be very careful about some important terms, like let me list it down for you so that it becomes easy. First is your integuments, the chalaza, then you have the micropyle, then you can say a bit about the cells within. So overall this is it, the most important terms which you need to elaborate when you are going to describe the structure of an ovule. So let's proceed. Now first of all, as I said, there are basically two integuments, one outer integument and one inner integument. These two, what do they serve? What is the most important function? They provide protection to the ovule, no doubt in that. Then we talk about the chalaza and the micropyle. Now chalaza, as I said, that it is opposite to the micropyle, and in fact it is that particular point, it is that point from where these integuments develop, from where integuments grow, or you can say they develop or originate. Best word, they originate. Now talking about the micropyle, it is the point where integuments do not fuse. So you can say if integuments provide protection, if they provide protection, they originate from the chalaza, no doubt, and this is the place where they do not fuse, means they do not form a simple single layer. So means instead of any other place, this is the most easiest point through which we can easily have access into the ovule. So definitely when a pollen grain helps in fertilization, the male gametes need to get inside this ovule in order to fertilize the egg cell. Now we will see what exactly is we are talking about, the cells that lie within. Let me tell you that if this is the structure of an ovule, I repeat, if this is the structure of an ovule, then I can fairly say this is the integument, this is the outer integument, this is the inner integument, and then I talk about this is the whole of your embryo sac. Now inside this, when we talk about the cells, okay, when we talk about the cells, they develop from one major, most important, the primary archisporial cell. The primary archisporial cell. I think this word is not new to you if you have actually gone through the video of androecium structure. So primary archisporial cell, it undergoes further divisions to give you some megaspore mother cell. Always remember, when we talk about pollen, we use the term microspore. When we talk about the ovule or the gynoecium, we use the word megaspore. Okay, so megaspore mother cell, and this megaspore mother cell further gives you, after some repeated divisions, mitotic and meiotic divisions, it gives you a total whole number of 8 cells. Now we'll see how those 8 cells come. 3 cells at the chalaza end. If this is your chalaza end, 3 cells over here, 3 over here, and 2 here. 3 plus 2 plus 3, 6, 8. 6 plus 2, 8. So in total, the entire cells, number of cells inside the ovule, you can say it is 8 in number. What do they contain? What do these cells consist of? They actually consist of the first and foremost thing, that is the egg apparatus. The egg apparatus. Now egg apparatus consists of 3 cells. What are those 3 cells? The middle one is actually the egg cell, most important heroine of the process called fertilization, and then comes these two cells. These are the synergids, okay, and we basically call these synergids as the supporting cells. Why? Because they help in, or you can say they support the egg cell during the entire phase of nourishment until and unless there is pollination and fertilization taking place. So these synergids gradually they will degrade. We will exactly see when they degrade when we are covering up the topic of fertilization. Now coming to this point, in this egg apparatus you have the egg cell, you have two synergids. So 2 plus 1, 3. Two synergids and one egg cell. These two, they are actually, I can say, these are the polar nuclei, and you can see they are exactly 2 in number. Okay, the polar nuclei, they are 2 in number. Now at the callosal end, as you can see that there is again another set of 3 cells, and what are they known as? They are actually called the antipodal cells. 3 in number. So 3, 2, 3. Total 8 cells are there. Now if question comes that what is the major function of the you can say the antipodal cells, the synergids, egg cell, polar nuclei. So in detail the entire thing, how they process, how they function, what is the significance of this polar nuclei, what is the significance of this antipodal cells and all, we will be covering in the few more moments that we are going to cover up, in which we will be actually discussing about the fertilization process in the plants. So I hope on a basic note this thing is clear. First we discussed about the various parts which actually make up the whole of your ovule, that is your integuments. You have callus, micropyle and the number of cells inside the ovule. Then we covered up about how the integuments, the various types of integuments, and then you can see exactly about the callosal end, the point from where the integuments originate, the micropyle where the integuments do not fuse, then inside from the primary archisporal cells, how due to multiple divisions there are 8 cells in total, or 8 nuclei which you can say present inside the ovule. At the callosal end you have the antipodal cells which are 3 in number. Then at the micropylar end you have the synergids along with the egg cell, which together constitute the 3-celled egg apparatus, and then in the middle you have the polar nuclei which are again 2 in number. So in total 8. So this is the basic structure of the ovule that we are talking about. Now coming to the topic of double fertilization and the triple fusion. Now before we proceed into this, I would like you to know that whenever we talk about fertilization, what does it mean? So fertilization actually refers to, you can say, the process of fusion of the male gamete with the female gamete in order to produce or diploid zygote. And let me quote myself that the gametes are basically haploid in nature while the zygote is always diploid. So whenever there is a sexual reproduction, it is mandatory that 2 gametes are fused and the 2 are haploid in order to obtain the diploid zygote. Okay, so in order to retain the diploid nature or the diploid number of chromosomes inside the cell, we require the fusion of the haploid gametes. Okay, now coming to this part called fertilization. As I said, the definition of fertilization, fusion of the male and the female gametes in order to give you the exact zygote which is diploid in nature, and that zygote undergoes a lot of cell divisions. The differentiation of cells takes place, the various fates are assigned to each and every cell, and then they proliferate, they expand in structure, and finally they give you one whole organism. So that organism in case of plant can be the embryo which further grows on to give you a new plant, or it can be the form of an embryo inside the humans or the animals which can give you the whole new organism which exactly looks like the parent. Now let's talk about the double fertilization. Why is it called double fertilization and what exactly happens over there? Now when I talk about double fertilization, always remember that this process starts with the fall of the pollen on the stigma, and the most important thing is that anyhow there has to be a compatibility or the self compatibility with the pollen grain. Only the ones which are compatible enough, they will be able to undergo the process of germination and then finally give you the fertilization outcome. Otherwise, there is not going to be any such process or any such chemical reaction which is going to take place over here. Now, coming forward to this thing, that exactly what changes take place over here. Let me quote that pollen tube, as we had seen in the previous video, it originates from the intine region of the pollen, and it is with the help of again the tube nucleus. Now, let me say that if the tube nucleus is able to guide this entire path through the style, how is it possible? It is actually because of chemical attraction, or which we use another word, that is chemotaxis. So the movement or the guided pathway of this pollen tube along the style so that it reaches the micropylar end and then it guides the male gametes into the ovule. This is what the most important objective is. And how is it done? It is because of this chemotaxis. Now, what causes chemotaxis? It is actually along the concentration gradient of three most important substances. And what are they? The most important of them are, one is your calcium ions, then you have boron, the amount of boron that is present, and third and the most important thing, that is inositol. Okay, so these are the three most important things which together make up the whole of this concentration gradient. Concentration gradient means from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, means along a fixed concentration a gradient is maintained either from higher to lower or from lower to higher. If we say against the concentration gradient, means from lower to higher. If we say along the concentration gradient, it is generally assumed to be from higher to lower concentration. So these are the three parameters that are generally seen in case of the chemotaxis, by the virtue of which it secretes certain enzymes, and simultaneously, because of attraction towards this concentration or the gradient created by the concentration of these substances, that the pollen tube starts elongating itself along the entire length of the style. Now, depending upon the length of the style, the pollen tube has to go that great distance. Yes, for example, in case of maize, you might have seen that silky hair like structure when you just remove all the leaves of the maize or the corn, you can say. You might have seen very silky hair like structures. They are actually the style. Okay, and it can be even up to 45 centimeter. The length of the style can be even up to 45 centimeter. So in that case, what happens? The whole of the pollen tube has to be guided through the tube by the tube nucleus through the length of the style so as to reach the ovule. Okay, once this has happened over here, it finds its way to enter into the ovule. If this is the ovule, let me draw the whole structure: antipodal cells, the egg apparatus, synergids along with the egg cell and the two polar nuclei over here. Fine, very happy, very glad. Now thing is, generally it is mentioned in the books of the lower classes that the pollen tube enters through the micropyle, but let me quote myself, let me tell you the reality that the actually pollen tube can enter through three pathways. Okay, so it can be either through the callosal end, can be through the micropylar end, or might be through the integument. But generally we see that in case of any normal flower or any normal process, we see it is actually the micropylar end through which the pollen tube is going to enter, and this type of process is termed as porogamy. Okay, this is called porogamy, and porogamy is the most common process which is seen in all the plants. Okay, that is entry of the pollen tube through the micropylar end. Now inside this pollen tube, as I said, that pollen tube brings the male gametes, as I said, the generative nucleus divides into two male nuclei or two male gametes, which are actually finding their way into this entire ovule. Now, once they have just pierced in, they reach here, the synergids start disintegrating. The synergids play no role. Now you can see inside this there are in total two male gametes. Now, how they would, or what course of action they would take inside this particular ovule. Now let me tell you that one of it will fuse with the egg cell. Okay, it will give you the egg cell. Second one, it will fuse with the egg cell to give you the zygote, which further grows into the embryo. The second of it actually fuses with the two polar nuclei. If it fuses with the two polar nuclei, you can see that in total how many nuclei or how many cells are there? One male gamete along with two polar nuclei. So in total you can see there are three cells are there inside. Now this is the reason why this type of fertilization, you can see exactly that exactly two types of fertilization are seen over here. In one, the egg cell fuses with the male gamete to give you the zygote, and this type of fertilization is actually referred to as the generative fertilization. Okay, this is called, or the first one is referred to as the generative fertilization, while the second one is called vegetative fertilization. Now question is that if in the first fertilization or the generative fertilization you get a zygote, what do you get in the second fertilization or the vegetative fertilization? The result is always endosperm. Now endosperm actually plays a very important role when we talk about the nutrition of the seed after fertilization or post fertilization. The ovule will become seed, no doubt in that. So who is going to provide the required amount of nutrition to it? Until and unless they germinate, they become embryo and they grow out of it, out of the cotyledons, and they lead a normal independent life. So who is going to provide it? It is generally the endosperm. In some seeds, the endosperm will persist and some it will not. The ones in which endosperm will persist, it is called endospermic seed. The ones in which this endosperm will not persist, it is called non-endospermic seed or exalbuminous seed. We also use the term exalbuminous. Now coming over here, vegetative fertilization gives you the endosperm, which again has the most important function of providing the nourishment to the seed after fertilization. Now this is the reason why we call it double fertilization, because two steps of fertilization are seen, one with the egg cell to give zygote, another one with the two polar nuclei to give you three cells and resulting in the formation of the endosperm. Now question, since this is involving the formation of a three-cell structure, that is the reason why we use the term for the second fertilization or the vegetative fertilization, we use the term triple fusion. The triple fusion question generally confuses a lot of people. A lot of students are confused by this. It is not a very separate or big deal. Two-step fertilization, so double fertilization. First fertilization gives you zygote, second fertilization gives you the endosperm, and since it involves a three-nuclear structure, that's why we use the term triple fusion. So fusion of the three cells or three nuclei you can see. So I hope this basic of the double fertilization process and the triple fusion is pretty clear to everyone. Okay, so I hope that with this video you people are pretty clear regarding the basic concept about the androecium structure, the gynoecium structure, then about the double fertilization. And now let me tell you that after fertilization, what changes do we expect? What are the various changes that can be expected to be seen in a flower after this fertilization takes place? So it is actually, if the fertilization takes place, then after that, first question, what happens to the petals? The petals will disintegrate. no doubt. Then sepals, or we talk about the calyx, it might persist, it might disintegrate. Might persist means it will stay as such, and we see it generally in case of your tomatoes and even in brinjal. They persist. You can see that green color structure out of it, and in some it disintegrates. Then talking about the androecium, no use. After fertilization you are totally useless, so kicked out. Now talking about once androecium is done, now we talk about the gynoecium, the various parts which take place. Now style, stigma, we are done with you. Okay, so style and stigma, we are done with you two creatures, we don't require you anymore. Talking about the ovary, ovary becomes the fruit, ovary becomes the fruit, ovule becomes the seed of the fruit, the seed of that fruit. Now inside the ovule there were some more structures, antipodal cells. The antipodal cells, they also disintegrated. Synergids, they disintegrated at the time the pollen tube had already formed. Okay, it might be at a time both are disintegrated, or maybe one by one that they are getting disintegrated. Now talking about the egg cell with the male gamete, it gave you the zygote, which will ultimately, when it receives all the favorable conditions, it will grow into an embryo, and the rest, that is the polar nuclei, and the male nucleus, they form the endosperm. So I hope this thing is pretty clear. The post fertilization changes, generally they ask you that what happens to the integuments. The integuments formed a very important barrier for the ovule, for the protection of the ovule. What happened to them? Integuments, actually, as I said, integuments, they are of two types. One is the outer integument and one is the inner integument. The outer integument forms the testa of the seed. It forms the testa of the seed, while the inner integument, it forms the tegmen of the seed. Okay, so basically the major function, if you're asked what is the function of testa or tegmen, then you can easily say that the major function is to provide protection. They form as a mechanical barrier and protect the seed from any sort of mechanical injury, or you can say from bacterial infection. So this is the most important function that they have. And if you are asked about the location of testa and tegmen, you can easily say that testa is the outer integument which has modified itself into the testa after fertilization, while tegmen is the inner integument which has modified itself into this second most layer of protection in the seed after fertilization. So that's all. Hope you have actually got a great deal of information from this video. So we just hope to bring you more sorts of such things so that this phase doesn't go as waste for you. You can gain something out of it. This has always been our motive, and we'll keep trying to stick to that particular motive.